the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner. Bit of a misty late March morning to greet us here at Caister St Edmunds near Norwich, High Ash Farm. It's our regular Countryside Podcast with Norfolk farmer and nature lover Chris Skinner. And I find you, Chris, I thought I'd find you here next to your lake.
Yes, one of my favourite places. Not that I have time to sit down and enjoy what I've created. Well, I suppose one of the school mottos where I went to school at Brackendale was almost busy as a bee. On my hat I had a picture of a bee, and I think that must have sort of distilled into my blood, so I hardly sit still.
If this was mine, I'd have a picnic chair in the back of the truck and I'd sit here all day.
Yes, with a knotted handkerchief on top of the head.
But you don't do that.
No, but I'm always got some project on the go, and I love it. Just look, going across the horizon there, we're at the bottom of one of the valleys on the farm, Chinese water deer, right in front of us. Just by magic, the wildlife appears. Rat, our terrier accompaniment, is just going round the water's edge here. And believe it or not, this wasn't a natural pond. It was dug when 2006, when I went into stewardship. And I suppose it's one of the most productive areas on the farm. We did a little talk in Bungay on Sunday, and on the screen there were several videos taken from this area of water. It's about 30 metres wide and 100 metres long, so there's quite an area of water surface. Much of it around the edges is very shallow. And believe it or not, this was an arable field, and it's by a stream, and we used lasers and set out the pond, and almost instantly from the word go it attracted wildlife. And when we did this little presentation, we saw egret here, beautiful whitebird, obviously grey heron, otters have been here and we got a video of them, mute swans are regular visitors, as well as a whole variety of waterfowl. Beside us is a little stake, and over the last few evenings I've attached my camera to this particular stake, exactly where we're standing, right on the water's edge, and always something happens which intrigues me. And right in the centre of the frame, we'll be able to see it on this week's podcast on High Ash Farm Facebook to accompany what we're talking about. A beautiful stripy bird suddenly appeared with shining eyes, reflective eyes, and it just melted my heart.
It was a very long beak as well.
Exactly. It was a common snipe. Nothing sort of common about them, although they're kind of brown and cream stripy plumage. The stripes on the heads go from the top of the beak over the top of the head, sort of long ways, whereas with the woodcock, another bird, it's also a wader, so is snipe. The stripes go across the top of the head, so you can always distinguish the two. Woodcock's also got a long beak, but you seldom find it by water. It was more a bird that's deserted the sort of marshland, and you find them more in woodland and rough scrub and bracken, whereas snipe, galligano, love this. So we're right on the edge. You can see the edge of the pond here is only an inch or two deep. Well, it's quite deep out in the middle. I'm actually standing on grass doing that.
Just gently shelves, doesn't it?
Yes, so it's a very gentle thing, and that's absolutely ideal. So the snipe comes along the edge of this water, just where the water meets the former arable field, and it's lovely and soft, so it could instantly pop its beak right down into the soil. It's the bird with the longest beak as proportional to its size of any British bird. We have native snipe, and we also have, during the winter months, lots of migrants coming across from western Siberia. Now, it's a huge kind of migration, particularly at that time of the year. November, they'll come across. Siberia, Western Siberia, there's lots of marshland there. It's 1,000 miles to Moscow, and it's another 1,000 miles to get here. So these tiny birds, and they don't weigh much more than about 4 ounces, they're game birds, so they're regularly shot. And when the ground gets frozen, they seek out areas like this right beside water where they can still, they probe in. Their main diet's worms. So we have resident snipe in the UK, which are here really all the year round. UK breeding populations more or less about 60,000 pairs, but during the winter months we go to 1.2 million birds, so a lot come over the North Sea, having done that huge migration. So they're still shot quite regularly, so sometimes in frozen ground snipe will flock together and fly up, and that's called a wisp. They've got a particular name of the flock of snipe, but you seldom see large numbers because, particularly here in the eastern counties, we've drained a lot of the marshland around this particular area, down beside the river Yare as it goes out to Yarmouth or Yarmouth. Many of the old marshes were ploughed up and put down to wheat, and actually before that happens they were drained as well, and so you lost that lovely wet, marshy, boggy habitat which is the home of the snipe. They love it. The wetter the better.
You must have been really pleased to see that on the video, because you weren't necessarily aiming to get a snipe.
No, that's the thing with trail cams. That's the thing with watching wildlife. When you go out to study one thing, or because you know it's there, and something else completely different happens. But the interesting thing is they will migrate. They feed like woodcock. They're quite nocturnal. They will be about in the daytime, and if you're out walking in a marshy area or beside a river or a dike or a stream, then suddenly this, almost under your feet, these birds fly up, and the flight is what gives them their sporting prowess as far as the shooter goes, if you like, because they don't fly in a straight line. They go up extremely quickly, just take off almost vertically, and then they weave, and that's got a special word attached to it as well. It's called jinxing. And so if you are a keen shot, because they aren't easy to shoot, they're a sportsman's one of the favourite birds that you can actually shoot. Although they're only 4 ounces, the debate is it's now an amber list species, meaning it's causing some conservation concern. The argument is, should we still be shooting them? But somebody who sort of conceals himself and takes a pot shot, often with a rifle, is called a sniper. But it actually comes from somebody who shoots snipe, and you've got to be a pretty crack shot to shoot them, and it's because of this jinxing flight that they have.
That's not to say you approve, is it?
No, I don't. I've been trying to have the consent to shoot them withdrawn for years and years and years. I just chivying away because, as I said, it's an amber list species. Woodcock are now a red list species, which means they've declined by 50% or more. In the case of woodcock, snipe, and snipe's got a diminutive cousin called a jack snipe, which we've often seen at the farm here. It's even smaller. Bearing in mind a snipe, give you an idea, is about the size of a starling, a little bit bigger, but it looks much bigger because it's got this 2.5-inch long 66 centimetre beak.
Proboscis.
Yeah, it's a really interesting beak though, and the jack snipe is about 5 inches from tip of beak to tip of tail. The common snipe is probably about 8 inches, but looks bigger because of the long beak, that's included in that length, and the long legs, so probing bird. But the beak fascinates me. This 2.5-inch long beak, you can actually see the snipe on the camera, and it probes into the ground. It's a very long, sharp, pointed beak, goes down into the ground. It's a very sensitive tool as well, because it can kind of sense earthworms or other soil invertebrates just down in the soil, 1 inch or 2 inches down. But here's the secret. You know, if you're going to open your beak up down there, you end up with a beak of soil. So just the tip of the beak opens up, and grabs the worm, it pulls it out, and worms, being what worms are, covered in little hairs, this is a common earthworm, they put the hairs out in their little tunnel, and they're jolly hard to pull out of the ground. I've often watched blackbirds doing the same thing. But snipe...
You got a tug of war.
Well, literally it is that, and sometimes the worm will just suddenly pop out of its hole in the snipe's beak, and the snipe will fall over backwards. They are quite amusing. Nest on the ground, 3-4 eggs, often in sedge and anything sort of vegetative cover. This is really good habitat around here.
Yeah, you've got some reeds and that
Yes.
sort of undergrowth there.
All the way round there. And
They could easily be snipe nests in there.
Absolutely, yes. So perfect. The eggs are really well camouflaged. When the young hatch, they don't stay in the nest like a lot of young birds. They start walking about almost straight away, and so I just love them. And it's a cracking video. When you see this, after all, I'm just a Norfolk farmer, and I'm learning to love what's on the farm, and it's very much a learning process. Which is why we do this podcast. It's sharing this, because nature really belongs to everybody. You'd like to think if you've got game on your farm or deer and you do deer stalking, it belongs to you. Actually, at the end of the day, we're sharing our planet with all these creatures. They all have different habitats, different habits, lots to learn about always, and it's learning that makes you respect, that they're living outside in what we dish out to them, if you like.
This is a terrific habitat, Chris. I've always enjoyed my trips down to your lake. This is a sort of glassy, mirrory surface. It's quite a calm day today, but it hides a myriad of different creatures.
Oh, yes, there's newts. Look, gudgeon. Look, okay, you set me off now. Just come 3 steps or 4 steps this way. I'm going to put you in the edge of the water. Instead of 1 inch of water, try 4 inches of water. Have a look here.
Wow. Lots of bubbles and sort of white material coming up. And we've got some tadpoles, haven't we? In the making.
In the making. Right. We didn't have to walk. Look, this is what nature's all about. You'll often see all you want to see in one spot. If you sit still or if you're in woodland, sometimes the wildlife will come back to you. There's a kind of captive audience in front of us.
This is high ash caviar here.
Yes, you could say that. It's wonderful. Just listen though, we've been serenaded at the end of the lake by a robin singing just then. I could just hear it. Right, so what's happened? We've had some mild weather in recent evenings, and the frogs, and wait for it, the toads have been busy, and all round the lake here where the grass comes over into the water, it's a superb habitat for them. And just underneath here there's probably a couple of dozen toads, some frogs, and they've been, the only way to describe it is at it, last night and the night before, and they've laid reams and reams of frog spawn and toad spawn.
Very large collection
there.
there. So that may be toad and that's frog, is it?
No, not at all. There's a huge difference between the two. And right, I've gone as deep as I can, but you can come a little bit deeper. Right, this is frog spawn, laid last night. Very gelatinous, almost black in colour on the top. It's very, very fresh. After a day or two, it changes colour like that, and instead of those little round specks in the middle of the spawn, you can see they've become oval shaped. Can you just see?
Yes.
And that's the beginning of the tadpoles. So what's happened is male frogs will have arrived here. Oh, rat's joined us in the water. Hello, rat. Male frogs will have arrived a few days earlier, and they'll take up sort of residence around the edge of this water area and start croaking, and that gives the females somewhere to home in on. And so croaking away, very, very noisy and incessant all night long. And of course they're vulnerable when they're doing that. Otters will come and eat them, heron at night time, and the egret as well. So its eat will be eaten out in the countryside. And so the male frog, once a female arrives in the pond, she will sort of be attracted to one of the males. He will then get on her back, and he puts his arms, he's got little pads on his front paws called nupetal pads. They're black in colour, and he grips her just behind her front legs really tightly. In fact, I've put my finger in near a male frog and it's gripped my finger, and I was quite shocked how tight the grip is. He grips her so tightly, she will then swim off, and once they're joined together like that, the little technical term is called amplexis, and he will grip her. She will then spawn. She puts her front legs around her belly and she squeezes, and then all this spawn will come out in the space of a minute or two, and at the same time he releases his sperm, and the jelly, or the frog spawn at that stage, quite alarming, sinks to the bottom. It's actually heavier than water. The jelly then swells up and absorbs water, and strangely it comes back to the surface like this.
But what's happened here, Chris? These are clumps and
Yes.
large clumps, but over here we've got eggs and spawn in chains.
You're determined to get my feet wet, aren't you? Here we go. I'm going to move up another step or so. We've hardly moved at all. Really well spotted, Matthew. This is toad spawn.
So this is frog.
Yes.
That's toad.
Completely different. And toad spawn can be 5-6 metres long, 18 feet in old money. Just one huge long chain. Now, there are two species of toad, really, common in the UK. Well, I was going to say common. The latter one, which I'll mention now, is the natterjack toad. They're now quite scarce. The nearest place to see or hear natterjack toad, they mate and lay spawn a little bit later, towards the end of April, than the common toad, buffo, the common toad which we've got here. And the nearest place would be Winterton Dunes, the SSSI there, and again down at Minsmere, and particularly at Dunwich, just before you get to the coast. There's a marsh area there, and there are literally hundreds of natterjacks there. Natterjacks are smaller. They've got a very distinctive yellow line down the middle of their back.
Highly protected though, aren't they?
They are now, yes. Really strictly protected, and it's an offence to keep them in captivity even, so you can't even collect the spawn because they're so scarce now. What's happened is, particularly on the dunes, the little puddles and small ponds that they lay their spawn in often dries out at this time of the year. We've had a series of quite dry springs, and that doesn't suit them at all. But here, the common toad's doing quite well. If I look down it, I'll move a little bit more. I have now got wet feet. Yeah. Right, and I'll just put my hand down and see if I can raise it up on my finger.
Like a necklace.
Yeah, look, and can you see it's a double strand of eggs. Yes. I'll see if I can get a better piece to show you. There.
Oh, it's quite beautiful.
It is. Long braids of spawn, and exactly the same thing happens. The females arrive after the males. This croaking business happens. And the male will get on the female's back and plexus again, and she will lay these long strings of eggs. With the common toad, buffo, which is here, she can lay up to 5,000-6,000 eggs over the space of an hour or two. It's a much slower process than frog spawn being produced. With a natterjack toad, perhaps 2,000 eggs, much smaller amount. But these then, beautiful double braid there. Can you see? Oh, Rat must have spotted somebody walking. We're right next to one of the permissive walks. Beautiful double braid just on the... You're all right, you've got boots on.
Double width.
Yes, double width. So remember, natterjack toad, a single row of eggs in the braid. Common toad, a double row going along. I think somebody must be walking along a track and we can't see them.
So when will these be frogs and toads?
Right, so the process is happening in front of us. You can see frog spawn that's laid perhaps a week ago. They've changed from the little black dots in the spawn to little oval shapes. That then develops into a tadpole. Once that's happened, the tadpoles break free from the whole sort of mass of frog spawn and then start swimming and become independent. They still get energy. They'll eat algae when in the tadpole stage. They go through this metamorphosis. They'll still eat algae, and also they reabsorb their tail as a sort of part of the nutrition. It's called just called reabsorption. It's really, you're eating yourself almost, but the tail gradually disappears, and at the end of that process, after 10, 12 weeks, you've got a tiny little froglet, I suppose we'd call it, not much bigger than your little fingernail. They are diminutive, and they will go into hibernation. Now, the female toads and female frogs, once they're mated, they exit the pond. They've had enough of all this breeding business and leave it, but the males will stay here and keep their kind of nupital fingers crossed, if you like, for another female to come along, and they will mate a second time. And this whole sort of kerfuffle of noise which they make at night just carries on, and so males will fight. They kind of have a bit of competition, but they also have a gentlemanly way of sorting out who's going to have access to the female. And it's been discovered that male frogs with the deepest croak are more likely to be larger, and the same with the toads. And so they kind of croak at each other, and if you've got a really deep voice, your competitor will generally just back off, so it saves wasting energy. You give up the fight before you have one.
That's a good way to decide things, isn't it? Rat has seen off interlopers.
Yes, there's a couple walking past. I noticed when they got level with us, the walking speed doubled.
Yeah, and Rat honour is satisfied, isn't he? Because he feels that
he just feels the whole place is his, you know. It's really strange. Look at that. Look, we've done, 2 or 3 steps. We've done a podcast almost without moving, and there are millions of eggs here in front of us. The braids with the toad spawn are truly amazing. 16, 18 feet long braid. Do you know what? I've got wet feet, and I don't mind a bit. Right.
The sun is trying to burn through, and yes, we've got hints of blue skies here as well, and it's getting a little warmer. And Chris has brought us about 100 yards here. How are your feet? Squelchy?
Yes, they are now, but it's one way of washing my socks without having to take them off. So, oh dear. Things you do when you're a farmer. Anyway, this is a newly planted hedge. Well, I say new, 2006, so getting on for 20 years growth here.
Richard Coles has emailed from Spixworth, and he says, in your excellent podcast, please can you tell us what is the white blossom in bloom right now in the hedgerows and trees? Is it blackthorn or maybe something else?
It's almost certainly the something else, because blackthorn is only just coming into flower. We're right at the end of March. Blackthorn and hawthorn, the 2 main hedging species used in the United Kingdom, and now start to come into flower. But there's one that comes into flower. It's also same members of the blackthorn family. They've both got prunus at the beginning of their name, and the other is the cherry or marabella plum species, and it flowers about 2 weeks ahead of the blackthorn. So that helps you. So anything that's been in flower up till now, unless it's in a really warm sheltered position, would be the cherry plum, the marabella species. Here in front of us, just coming into flower in this newly planted hedge, is blackthorn. And down the hedgerow mix, I've used really all British native species. So blackthorn has to feature in that. It forms a dense, tangled shrub. The wood looks a bit blackish, and each little spike finishes with this fearsome spike. You can see.
And these are the thorns.
These
of
are
the
the
name.
thorns that gives it its name, and you can see that blackish colour all the way down. It's armed with these sort of fearsome spines. Now, it was almost a mistake to put blackthorn in the hedgerow mix. I was warned about it, and being young and stupid when I was in my 50s, I still am. What I didn't know is it suckers out. And the hedge behind us, there's blackthorn come out 2 or 3 metres from the hedge, and I have to keep cutting it. So if we look down at the bottom of the hedge, hawthorn won't do this, but blackthorn will. Just look here. Here it is, one there, one there. I mean, it's as thick as cress down here.
And if left unchecked, it
just keeps coming out, and quite at a rate. Some of it can actually grow. Look, it's out here over a metre from the hedge already, and that's been cut. This field's been cut for hay, and so some of the blackthorn's already been cut and removed, and it forms these thickets. So as a stock-proof hedge, it almost does too well. It just forms a thicket out into the pasture, and unless it's controlled, it will take over. So nonetheless, it's very beautiful. And if we stand back just a little bit and get the sun, which is now coming out behind us, it really looks as though the countryside's being dressed as though it's going off to a wedding.
gorgeous white flowers.
Yes, 5 odd petals there and yellow stamens in the centre of it, and bees love it. So it starts to flower now. It often coincides with cold weather. You can look up on that stem that goes up out of the top of the hedge that hasn't been cut. Can you see all the thorns? So all the way up that stem, it's fearsome. The thorns are about 2 inches long. They look like needles from here.
And they're quite considerable as well. When you put your finger on
Oh,
them,
yes,
they're not easy
yes.
to snap.
Yes, so it comes through on part of the scientific name for the species, Prunus spinosa, or the spiny plum, if you like. So once the flowers have been pollinated, you can see it feels a bit chilly all of a sudden. And there's something about blackthorn. It's called the blackthorn winter. So often when it comes into flower at the end of March, which is what we are, it often coincides with a quick snap of really cold weather before winter finally gives up the ghost and spring properly gets hold of the countryside. So it's called the blackthorn winter, and it's often associated with that period of weather right at the end of March. So it will get pollinated, and if it is successful at being pollinated by insects, then you have a good crop of the fruit of the blackthorn, which is called sloes, and that's one of my favourites. Obviously, add a little bit of gin, some sugar, and skin us well away after that. you drink standing up. That's the rule. Only a sherry glass full, and you can see why my complexion is the colour it is. I think it's.
Well, I think we're due giving out that recipe again later in the year.
Yes, we certainly will. I don't do it very often, and I loved it. It's my granny's recipe, and it works. You need good quality gin, though. She didn't sort of skimp on the gin, but nevertheless, it's Rose Skinner, my granny's recipe. There, look at these little petals, and you can see them there. So over the next week and in the first week of April, the blackthorn comes into flower properly, and so those white flowers that look, as I said, as though the hedgerows are going off to a wedding. It looks so joyful when you see it. It lifts the spirits, and then the blackthorn blossom all drops onto the ground, whether it's pollinated or not, the petals. And then the next one to come in flower, there's this succession. As I said, we have a job to keep pace with it all in the podcast. It all happens so quickly. Once you get the warm weather, this fellow here, which is hawthorn, the main hedging plant in this part of the country, produces its leaves first, and then it comes into flower afterwards. Just so remember, it's very different. And hawthorn comes into flower at the end of April, not the end of March like the blackthorn, and it's got another name. It's called May. to coincide with the month of May. So that's how you tell the difference. And this hedge will be absolutely glorious. Neil has only cut one side of it, left the top and the other side, and so it will be just a riot of blossom. That then produces the hawberries, which our winter visiting thrushes absolutely love. The Blackthorn, the sloes, tend not to be eaten until quite late in the season. If you try putting your teeth into a blackthorn sloe, when it's still sort of greenish, plumish colour, it sort of draws your elbows up to your ears. That's the polite way of putting it. It sets your teeth on it. It is extremely bitter, but as the first frosts and you go into winter, the sugars start to develop in around the plum. It's actually not a berry, it's actually the blackthorn fruit is actually called a drupe, is its technical name, D-R-U-P-E. Similar spelling to what I was called at school, but that was a drip by the teacher. But nevertheless, it's a really great plant, and out in the edge of the woodlands where I've planted it all around the new areas of woodland on the farm to give the wood a soft edge, it's allowed free range there, and it's already forming these lovely thickets with a very low edge and then going up. It seldom gets more than about 3 metres high, would be about its highest. So it's definite member of the shrub layer in woodland and around field edges as well. But remember, it suckers out into your pasture. If you do putting new hedgerows in, you've got to really keep your eye on it. You turn your back and it's out in the field and take over your grazing. So nevertheless, I love it hugely, and that's why it features all over High Ash Farm. Blackthorn, thank you very much for the question.
The ducks at High Ash Farm going in to roost for an evening. Hey everyone, it's Matthew here, and if you've been enjoying our countryside podcasts, we've got a small favour to ask.
Yes, Matthew. What we're going to do is to ask for a small donation to help run the podcast, and any surplus goes for conservation at High Ash Farm here. And so it's really important. We both love to keep the podcast going, and that duck agrees with me, I think.
Well, it's straightforward to donate. You can make a one-off donation or set up a small monthly contribution, and the address is highashfarm.com/podcast.
We're hugely grateful for any support. It means we can keep sharing the stories of the countryside, which I love doing each week, but it's that small amount of costs we need to cover. So thank you very much in advance.
We've had High Ash caviar this week, and now a chance to stay tuned to the podcast. Later in the year, you'll have High Ash liqueur, i.e. those wonderful sloe gin bottles.
Yes, sloe gin. I promise you'll have a bottle. You should see Matthew's face, everybody. He's grinning from ear to ear, even wider.
Just in the van here, on the other side of the farm. And Chris, what are you seeing?
Matthew, we did this last week, woodland green woodpecker, and we're right out in the open on the horse pastures, and a pair of green woodpecker has just flown up into the tree in front of us. And I mentioned this last week, one of their tricks is if they see something a bit uncertain of, they're in a tree, they just hoik themselves round the other side of the branch, and both of them, quite large, our largest woodpecker, both of them have become invisible.
Where have they gone? I saw their very strange loping flight towards that dead tree.
Yes.
And now they've gone.
No, they've joined up, so I think that's our third pair that I've noted on High Ash Farm. They're doing really well. Great spots are doing really well, and the one that I'm concerned about, I did take you to their nesting site last year, was the lesser spot, Dendrocopus minor, and we're not quite certain why they've declined. Well, I came down to this corner. I'll just put the little truck in reverse. I came to this corner of the farm where the woodpeckers are for a completely different reason. And that's to show you this tree in front of us. It's a venerable old ash tree, and I'll just move the car. We are 20 yards from it. I'm going to turn the engine off, handbrake on, and we are being stared at by somebody who's very grumpy indeed. Not my farming neighbour. I'm just going to pass these over to you, a pair of binoculars. Now, there's an enormous hole, Matthew, in the side of the tree.
Yes, I've got it on.
And at the base of the hole...
Oh, there he is. I would have never seen that, Chris. There he is.
It's a little owl, Athene noctua. And again, we mentioned that with some footage where it nested last year on our little talk we did at Bungay at the Fisher Theatre, and got some lovely footage. And the same pair, at least I think they're the same pair, and the male is staring at us. He's tiny, only about 100 mil tall, 4 inches in
piercing large eyes, though.
Yes, yellow eyes, always look very grumpy with a kind of permanent frown on their face. And we are so spoilt to see that. I'm going to keep us in touch, and we'll visit it again in a week or two, and we might see the youngsters. But there's a pair there, and Mum is already incubating. The tree is quite hollow. It goes down quite a distance, almost down to ground level. And a little bit of a secret. Can you see the droppings just beneath where he's sitting? Yes. The tree is kind of whitewashed.
That's a bit of a giveaway, but otherwise the bird has such perfect camouflage for that tree.
Absolutely, and that's the secret of them. And I've learnt to look when they're perching out on branches, out on the tree. You suddenly look for, well, the only way to describe it is about the size of a clenched fist. Perfect camouflage, though, and against the bark, the plumage almost looks like a mirror image of the bark, and the same colour as well. But look at that, just looking back at us. We're just pointing down the hill a bit. I don't know if we can... The truck might... I was going to say you might need to get out and push Gudgeon rather than start the car. It might roll. We're both rocking about. Let's just see if we can get a little bit closer without frightening him. Now I turn the engine off again. Yes, now we're freewheeling towards him. And what I like about wildlife watching is you don't disturb what you're looking at when you get there. I'll have a little look through the binoculars. What are we? Oh, wow. He's squatted down. He's still facing us. That's, 25 feet from us. Britain's smallest owl, reintroduced species. We've got lots of fossil records of them from way before the last ice age. So lots of people say, don't count them at all. They're non-native, but I can promise you they're at home in the British Isles, as they are in southern Europe, where you can also find them there. God, what a treat. What a podcast. Look. Yeah,
the little owl.
The little owl as well to finish us off.
And green woodpeckers, who are still making themselves scarce.
Yes, that's the trick they have. They're notorious for that, and there could well be a hole in that's a venerable old oak with what we call a stag's head on the top of it. Lost all the twigs, but it's regrown again from lower down, and it's going for a second sort of life, if you like, almost. But anyway, I'm just going to drive us a little bit away. Then we've got some questions to answer.
Yes.
And let's just go backwards away, and all being well, he'll stay there, which he is. There. And then we'll just drive away like that. We're 50 yards away now. So just move off. And we didn't see Mrs. because I'm pretty certain she's incubating and just keeping the eggs. They're round, spherical eggs, and that's her job, to keep them warm. He'll be feeding her, though. Courtship feeding's finished, and he's actually taking the food in just to keep her sustained. And there's another little owl box just there, where another nest, only 50 yards from the other pair. And in the corner of the wood in front of us, that's Countley Hill Plantation, a big sandy warren there. And I used to go up there as an 8-year-old, sit on the corner and watch the rabbits. And I came back and told my father that there were owls going down the rabbit holes. He shrugged his shoulders. Stupid boy. and they don't go in rabbit holes. And there was many years later, I saw it again and again and again, and we actually came across it a few years ago on a different site on the farm. A pair of little owl nesting in a rabbit warren right out in the open on High Ash, and yet they've got all these venerable old oak trees to nest in. So it's the exception that proves the rule, as they say.
Right. You weren't a stupid boy.
He's
probably on that occasion.
He's probably right. Yes, probably right in the long run. Yes, for trying to farm this inclement land, which is all sand, gravels, clay. So I've got everything you could possibly wish for, and it's quite a challenge with all the hills and the drought. The droughts we've had started in '76, the first one, where I was combining. This will amuse the farmers. In top gear on the combine, as fast as it would go, and you'd combine for an hour before you got a tank full. It was just drought-stricken.
Just dust.
It was basically dust I was combining, yes. So it's all changed now. It's green and verdant, and I've just seen a kestrel go into a box and a tree further up, the next one up the row. We might catch up with that next week. We can sit on the top of the hill and do a bit of luxury bird watching. Right, we've got some questions to answer now.
Hang on, before the questions, what have you seen, Chris?
A stoat coming down the hedge towards us. Unfortunately, I've let Rat out of the truck, and it was just coming along, sitting up on its hind legs vertically, and you could see that cream-coloured line on the chest.
I saw the bib, the white bib.
Right. So you can tell the difference between a stoat and a weasel. With a weasel, it's got W in the word. The line where the cream-coloured fur joins the brown colour on the back is wavy, and in a stoat, it's a straight line. So that was definitely a stoat, and it's gone into the hedge. Rat's working his way along the other side of the hedge where we are. It's a good old thick blackthorn hedge there, and it might pop out again any second, but what it's doing, it's looking for small mammals, things like long-tailed field mice, anything in a burrow, and it can go down there, or even young rabbits at this time of the year. That was a sight and a half. Oh, no. Wildlife's just overflowing on this week's podcast. Come on, rats come out of the hedge exactly where the stoat was, Mustela ermina, and they do smell rather, so his tail is wagging. He's picked up the scent, and he's got no chance of catching that, but he's walking up the scent line where the stoat came down.
We have got some questions. First, though, let's say hello to a few people who've contacted the podcast. Karen Gray, you're an inspiration, Chris, says Karen. That's nice, isn't it?
Thank you very much.
Chris and June Marshall, who were at the Fisher Theatre at Bungay last week. Lovely to hear from you. And Tracy Horsfield, I wanted to thank you for the ongoing inspiration you give me for my own wildlife project. We have planted 50 trees, a further small orchard, and the pond life is definitely improving.
Excellent. A great way of attracting wildlife quickly as a water feature in the garden.
All the episodes are wonderful, says Gillian Handyside, who lives near Paris.
Goodness me, they're going around the world.
Robert Funnell lives a bit closer to home at Diss, which was one of John Betjeman's favourite places. The videos from the trail camera were fantastic at the show last week at Bungay.
Oh, thank you very much.
When we got the clicker to work.
Yes. I love a few problems. It makes people smile.
My sister and I only discovered your Radio Norfolk and more recent podcast last December and are now total addicts, says Joe Wicken, who is learning about the nature at High Ash Farm and finds it inspiring.
Oh, 3 inspirations there. Wow.
Aaron, I've recently now recovered from my 8-hour round trip to Bungay via High Ash for a walk, of course. So this is Aaron, who lives some way away and used to work in the mining industry in Australia, in fact, but was homesick and found the podcast some 10 years ago.
Wow, that's quite a story. Thank you for that email. And I think he drove all the way up from Kent. So thank you very much indeed.
And he's put up bug hotels and 16 swift boxes in his garden and cups for 24 house martin nests. bat boxes, tit boxes, 2 barn owl boxes. You get the picture, he
I've
says.
got the picture. Well done. Congratulations. And I think there might be something in the post coming for us too as well. Very generous and a huge thank you.
Well, thank you, Aaron. And what else have we got here? Terry and Ros, who live in North Wales. They wander around there, and we've encountered many trees blown over in the winter storms. We were wondering how high ash had fared.
Yes, well, I've suffered our fair share of mainly mature trees coming over. The last one from the winter storms I've only just cleared. I showed Matthew my week's hard work of moving it. It's on one of the lovely grass tracks, so we could hardly take a tractor. I didn't want to damage the track. It's all cleared up. Now, it's a bit of a problem, but native trees always top of the list, and that would be oak trees. They usually get to 200-300 years before anything can topple them over, so young oaks are very wind fast. I'd recommend those. Deep rooted as well, can cope with a variety of soils. But if you want the most wind sort of resistant tree in the world, I have planted an avenue many years ago in the late 1980s, sequoias, redwoods, and they grow, a Yellowstone Park right on the west side of the United States, and again up into Canada, right on the Pacific coast there, and they can reach 200 feet plus easily, and got interested in them because I took my 3 children to Linford Arboretum, quite close to Thetford, down there in the southwest of Norfolk, and there's some fantastic Wellingtonias, they're also called. They were introduced in the mid-1850s around the time of Field Marshal in Wellington, so that's their other nickname. And the trees there, we all joined hands. There was 5 of us, and we still couldn't reach around the girth of the largest sequoia gigantica there, the largest tree in the world, over in the States it is, and also the tallest trees in the world, which are also wind fast, Sequoia sempervirens, and they came from... Oh, Matthew, look!
There's your stoat.
There's a stoat.
Oh, large white bib.
Oh, goodness.
That is a treat, isn't it?
Look at that.
They are so invisible.
Oh, quickly, if you're quick, you might get the binoculars on it, focus them in. Oh, it's ducked down.
I got a few seconds.
Yes. Oh, wow. It's still there. Oh, there it is. There it is. Ears up.
It's like Zebedee popping up.
Look at that. Oh, goodness.
I can see almost a cat-like face.
Yes, it is, yeah, and very distinctive canine teeth there.
Oh, have a look, Chris. Have a look through the glasses there.
Look at this. We are truly spoilt. Oh, look. Yes, remember the same family as the otter. Same shape, lithe, duck down again. I think it is still there, or there's a tiny hole in the edge of the horse track, and it's up again. Oh, you don't know how spoiled. No, many states, they just would not tolerate that. They have to be controlled, and yet it's given me joy, pleasure, and it's part of what we call biodiversity. You couldn't make up what we're seeing. That is fabulous. Look at it, sitting bolt upright, 10 yards away.
The little ears.
And listening and looking all round and scenting, because that's where Rat was just a moment ago. It's still there. Don't
Wonderful.
believe it.
Down again. But they're so difficult to spot. And here we are. We just parked up for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
A couple of quick questions. Sue Nicholson says, out for a walk the other day, carrion crow sitting on the grass. When he saw us, he made a rattling sound.
Yes, crows will make a whole variety of different sounds. That rattling sound is quite characteristic. Maybe there's some food nearby and it was just trying to protect them, and probably its mate was nearby.
And Amy says, hedges. Obviously, we all know about the great benefit to conservation that a hedge will confer, but she says, why do farmers cut them so short?
Yeah, it's very traditional, really, because hedges, as we found out earlier in this podcast, if you don't keep them cut, and particularly if you've got blackthorn with them, they will encroach into the field. But right through the 1970s, farmers were paid to remove hedges because harbours sort of wildlife, which is what you didn't want to eat your crops, like what we've just seen, a venerable rabbit catcher, that stoat, Britain's little carnivore, which will kill prey much larger than itself, all sorts of wildlife and nesting birds, all of which were contrary to the government white paper in 1971, which was called Food from Our Own Resources, and hedges were just a bee nuisance, to put it politely, as farmers would say. So you grubbed them out, got paid to do it, and then you could have join two fields together. You could then have larger machinery, and that's the way that many farmers have gone in the county and across the UK. Large fields, large machinery, labour reduced hugely, so lots of benefits from it. But what we just saw is my payday, Gudgeon. Honestly, that has made me smile. I'll probably be smiling all day till next week's podcast.
Well, we got you up close to the frog spawn, and then that marvellously grumpy little owl, the loping flight of the green woodpecker who just disappeared once they'd seen us, and the stoat who very handily hung around and displayed himself.
You're telling me? I think it's still there. It's just gone into the hedge bottom.
Chris@highashfarm.com. That's the email address, and we love to receive all of your emails. Plus, thank you so much for the support you've given to this podcast, which operates once a week all through the year, and many of you have been making small one-off or monthly donations. Either way, it's terrific that you're supporting this endeavour, and if you want to find out more about donating, the address for the website is highashfarm.com/podcast.
And thank you, everybody. It's a huge pleasure to see what we've just seen, and I love sharing all of this with anybody who wants to listen.
Look at Rat sunbathing. He's lying on the ground. He wants a tummy rub, I think.
Oh, right, there's a job for you.
Here he is.
Good boy.